Hey everybody, welcome to episode 49 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen Audi questions. On this episode, we talk about different boost levels from different tuners, brake fade, and why a dealer won't admit to a timing chain tensioner problem.
Drew F via YouTube says, would you still recommend Unitronic to someone who doesn't have an authorized dealer anywhere near them? They only shop near me as an APR one. I was leaning towards them for sake of having a local dealer. I really want good support from a shop, especially for tuning screws with my factory warranty.
Okay, so Drew asked this question actually on our video we just put out about the Unitronic cable and flashing your own vehicle. So basically the question is, you don't have a local Unitronic dealer and you do have a local APR dealer, and you're thinking about should you go APR or Unitronic, and the reason being because you want to have a dealer local to you. So let me touch on a couple things. First, choosing which one you're going to go with is more about features and what you're looking for. And while having a dealer local to you matters and can potentially matter, when you're talking about Unitronic, and specifically if you're looking at the Unitronic and you're comfortable with that, flashing your own vehicle and doing that install yourself, then it's not as important to have a local dealer near you, only based on the fact that you're going to be able to flash the car back to stock on your own or performance software, and any support you're going to be needing is going to be direct with the manufacturer, Unitronic, as opposed to through a third party, which would be somebody like us or an APR sub dealer. So for that reason, I would say it's not as important. Now, the other component that I would mention is if you're looking at, basically, you're saying you want to be able to have support if you have a warranty issue, it doesn't need to be, any shop should be able to support you of any issues non-warranty related, but it really varies depending on your level of comfort. If you feel like that's the best choice for you, then that's your decision to make, and I can't make it for you. But if your only concern is to be able to flash the car back and forth and get support from the manufacturer, you're going to get that from Unitronic through a Unitronic system anyway. So I know that's not really an answer to your question, but the reality is I can't really answer your question. It really boils down to what your personal preference is on that particular subject.
Demonic Bolt via YouTube says, would you say your brake fade was reduced over the standard set? I shot a message, but I'm really just trying to upgrade the brakes to handle mountain runs with a lot of braking bends and the occasional track day, not reinvent the wheel.
All right, so this question was asked on one of our recent DIY brake videos talking about performance brakes and wondering if we have brake fade on this car for the EBC Red Stuff. First, let me start with this. Brake fade is something that you only get under heavy braking conditions and would generally only happen under really heavy use. So the EBC Red Stuff sport pads are something that are kind of a sporty pad that's meant for street use, but they're really solid for street use in general. Maybe good for mountain runs, you know, that might kind of test their limitations, but getting brake fade on a pad like that would be kind of challenging, and you'd probably have to beat the car pretty hard to do so. So we haven't seen any brake fade. But now keep in mind, I'm kind of old, so I don't really drive cars really hard anymore. It's really a lot of just around town driving. And, you know, if I find some back roads, we'll do some spirited driving and stuff like that. But so I don't experience any brake fade. But most importantly, you're asking a question about like heavy mountain runs and occasional track days. And I covered this in a previous question that I answered about brakes, where it talked about you're asking for almost two opposite things, because you want a street pad that's also going to perform on the track, and those aren't really two things that are possible. So you have to kind of make your choice as to where you want to make your sacrifice. If you want to have track pads that can handle track use and not fade, then you're going to have to go with something like the EBC Yellow Stuff or some other track pad that can handle that heavy use. Because if you go with another pad like the Red Stuff, it might fade when you go towards an actual track day. And when I say track day, you know, if you're doing like SCCA events in parking lots, probably not going to have too big of an issue with most of the sport pads. Now, if you're doing like track days at like full racetracks where you're getting up to, you know, high speeds of, let's say, 80, 90, 100, 110 miles an hour on a straightaway and then hammering on the brakes when you come into a turn, now you're talking about really testing the purposes of a street pad, and you're probably going to get fade. So understanding the circumstances you would get fade in is, to me, the most important component of this. And so but the bottom line is EBC Red Stuff has not had any fade yet, but I haven't really pushed the limits, and I don't suspect you would get fade unless you really beat on them real hard.
Angel via email says, so basically I just called the dealer I used to schedule a recall service. While doing so, I asked the service guy I'm on the phone with about timing chain tensioners and if his shop has a lot of traffic with them needing to be replaced. He quickly seemed to dismiss it as something only that happens as a result of failing to maintain a vehicle. I attempted to mention some different sources I heard from and ways they used to diagnose if this was an old tensioner on the car. The Humble Mechanic has a video on a non-invasive way to check this via a circular rubber plug on the cover behind which the tensioner should be visible. As I mentioned this to him, he seemed like it was absolutely not something they would be willing to inspect. My question is, does it sound like a brush off? Should I check with another dealership? He seemed to suggest that I don't really have much they can do until this part fails, and at that point I think it's already too late. I live in South Jersey, my vehicle is a 2012 GLI, mileage approaching 34,000.
Okay, Angel, so let's start with this. By asking the question you asked, the person who worked at the dealer, first of all, they probably handled it wrong, but second of all, you're putting them in a really tough position, and here's why. A lot of people in your circumstance who have a newer car that they have a part that is potentially known to fail based on a lot of the, obviously, the stuff we put out, the stuff you mentioned, Charles, the video he made about checking it. I'll link to that in the description below for anybody who's not familiar. And also we have, if you're not familiar with the timing chain stuff, I'll link it down there as well. But they're in a really bad spot because when you ask them that question, you're asking them to admit that something was improperly made. Now, they didn't make the car, and anybody who's aware that they're not responsible for making the cars understands that logically. Oh, they didn't make the car, so they can't also then cover under warranty. But from most average people's perspective, the dealership is Volkswagen, and while that's never true because Volkswagen doesn't own any dealerships in the US, they're all privately owned. From a customer's perspective, that's the case. So a lot of customers in that situation would say I've heard of this, blah, blah, and if you were to admit it at the dealership level, they would then be in a bind to where the customer is going to try to hold their feet to the fire to get it covered under warranty because they have a known bad part on the vehicle and they should fix it and blah, blah, blah. Well, the reality of the situation is the dealer has absolutely zero control over what Volkswagen covers on higher mileage vehicles based on a known prone failure part. It's just not the way things work. So by asking that question, you're asking this particular person, and again, while I think he handled it improperly, you're asking them to admit to something that they have zero control to fix if and when you believe that it's their responsibility to fix the problem. So if you're looking for somebody to tell you should you check it, I think we've already covered that, and us and Charles and probably a bunch of other people have covered, you should have it checked. But if you're asking them to check it and they won't check it, that's different, but you're gonna have to pay them to check it. So maybe that's where you kind of ran into that confusion of you're looking for them to check it free of charge because it's a known issue or something like that. If you're willing to pay them to check it, any shop should be willing to do that for you. If they weren't, try a different dealership. But I suspect that most likely the person you were talking to felt like you were trying to pin them against the wall. And if they do that, they're not going to feel like they can speak openly because they're going to feel like you're going to try to trap them into saying something that then they're going to be a bind into trying to help. You're going to hold them to trying to fix something that they can't actually help you fix. So hopefully that answers your question, as in a little bit of insight into how the inner workings of how dealerships work and why that person was not really able to answer that question completely and open the way they'd probably like to. But also something to keep in mind, failing to maintain these cars properly will also cause that problem. So it's not like he was kind of just completely making stuff up. That is a big part of why these fail or can potentially fail. So there was a half-truth to what he was talking about.
Robert via Facebook says, I'm looking into tunes and I just saw someone say the APR runs 28 PSI on stage 2. They also stated that Uni runs 19 PSI on stage 2, and if that's true, how does Uni even compete? I know that would make some things easier on the turbo, but wouldn't Uni have to advance timing significantly to make up the power? I'm sure even when they fall well short if they're running 9 PSI less, but a great tune can go a long way with less. Any guidance would be well appreciated. In the meantime, I'm going to search for dynos.
Robert, so let's start with this. To answer your question about tunes and running boost. First, tune companies actually don't list boost as a metric that, you know, like this tune gets X amount max boost. And here's why. Boost out of all vehicles is going to vary based on a lot of conditions. External air temperatures, the mods that are on the vehicle, which would include things like intakes and upgrade intercoolers, and water meth would also be able to run higher boost. All those things allow the boost to raise on a tune. So yes, there's probably a max boost programmed in there, and that's going to vary depending on the tune. With that said, you're going to see varying results from a bunch of different people on different tunes, but APR does run higher boost numbers than Unitronic. 19 is actually low. On this car, we get on the higher end of around 22 to 23 PSI of boost. Yes, APR cars I know do run in the upper 20s. I can't say specifically how high because I've never really tested one to say for sure, but just based on what I've seen in the community, that's the feedback I've seen. Then the next question, do they get similar numbers? From what I've seen, they do get similar numbers on different dynos. And again, you're saying you're doing the research. I recommend anybody who has any question about this, do the research about dyno numbers. We have a dyno when we were stage 1 plus on this car that shows all that numbers that we put out then. We have intention to do more dynos at some point and probably maybe rewind a couple different things and maybe try to tier mod it up while we're dynoing at each level. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet, but the one thing I want to touch on about dynos, and this is really important, that a lot of people, everybody looks at dyno numbers as like a snapshot of the max power of a tune. And the problem with that is a lot of different variables go into play when it comes to dynos, and they are from anything from different dynos. Some dynos are known to have more accurate numbers, and some of them have more inflated numbers. Also, you can do different things. People kind of can tweak dynos to make them do different things and put out different numbers. The day that it was done, the ambient air temperature that it was done, the altitude that the dyno was done at, all those things come into play. Not to mention the car is a variable as well, along with the other tunes. So to me, unless you have the same car on the same day with the same mods and then maybe just switch tunes, that's really the only way to really get an accurate picture of what a tune is like. And to me, I don't really see dynoing as a really super relevant result. It matters for the fact that you want to make sure you're getting power, but your car, you don't drive it on a dyno every day. So getting peak power at, you know, making sure you're getting the most boost, especially when you go with some of these smaller tuners that, yes, they push for max boost, but because they don't have the complexity of and all these engine dynos like some of the big tuners have, they have drivability issues. And like, yeah, that sounds great to get really great numbers on a dyno, but when it doesn't drive right, when you're on the highway cruising and you go to hit the pedal, or under some weird situation where you come to a stoplight and it doesn't come off the line properly, or whatever. There's a million different variables that go into tuning a car. I don't know them, and I don't even begin to pretend to know them, but I know that a lot of the machinery and a lot of equipment that some of the bigger tuners have, smaller tuners don't have yet, because obviously it's expensive and it's not easy to get a hold of and all that stuff. So To me, those are more relevant parts of tuning than anything. So that's more what I would look at as far as drivability and just general experience from people who either have had it or multiple people who have had multiple are really the best ones. There are very few people out there who have had more than one tune, but those are the people who can speak the best about this specific stuff. Okay, so to answer your question about the boost versus timing and how if you don't have one, you have to obviously push some other parameters to maintain a similar level. I don't really know how Unitronic programs their cars to make similar power numbers with less boost. To me, it's not really as important because it's not information they're ever going to divulge. You know, that's like asking the Colonel to give you his original recipe. It's not going to be something they're going to release. And so the more important factor is, okay, your concern is, are they now making other sacrifices by not running more boost? Timing advance is something that is, as you run it, you can only run so much timing advance because otherwise the engine's going to knock and you're going to have severe engine damage due to knock issues and a bunch of other stuff that could cause major failure. So if that was the case, if they were pushing that limit too far, you would have seen a lot more problems related to that specific problem. And I don't have any concern that that's the issue, that they're pushing ignition advance so far that they're having issues with knock. So I guess the reality is your debate is, which one should I go with? And that's really the debate of a million people who ask that question all day long, and it's a ridiculously debated topic, and to me they're all useless debates. The more important factors when it comes to selecting a tuner would be support from the company, support from the dealer if you need them. You know, with Unit Connect, as mentioned earlier, and we just shot a video on how to do it. It's less important with Unit Connect because you can then flash your car back to stock. But if you need a dealer network to support you, the dealer you're dealing with and their ability to support you is also a relevant factor too. And then overall drivability and feedback from the community is relevant too. So those are all factors that I would consider when you're making that decision.
If you put an IS38 turbo in a GTI, is that technically considered a VW sanctioned part, considering that's what they use OEM on an R?
Okay, so if you put an IS38 turbo on your Mark 7 GTI, will it void your warranty? The simple answer is yes, it will void your warranty 100%. And let me touch on a few things. This is a common misconception when it comes to Volkswagen models, or really Volkswagen Audi, is because you have models like the GTI where you have the Golf R that has a lot of upgraded parts, which would be something like the intercooler or the turbo or the brakes or anything like that. Because you see those parts and they're better, you think, oh, because they're factory parts, it will still be covered in warranty. But the reality is that any part that was not put on the car when it was built from the production plant is not going to be covered in warranty. Now, the one exception to that is going to be Volkswagen accessories. But another common misconception when it comes to VW accessories is that any Volkswagen accessory that fits to the car means that it will be covered in a warranty. And this is also another common misconception, is that those driver gear things or on Mark 7 GTIs, a lot of people use driver gear springs that are intended for Mark 7 Golfs on GTIs because they think it maintains their warranty. But the reality is that because it was a modification or a spring that was intended for the Golf, it doesn't apply to the GTI. So if you bring your car into a dealership and there's a suspension noise on your car on a GTI that has driver gear springs and they're telling you it's not under warranty, it's because it's not an approved accessory. It's not intended for the vehicle. Volkswagen has not developed it for that vehicle. Now, does it fit? Sure does. Guess what? No problem. It'll fit, install, lower the car. It's something that's a very common thing. But it does not maintain your warranty because it's not an approved accessory for the car. And that's happened with a bunch of other accessories over the years. But the reality is that unless it's an approved accessory, meaning as far as Volkswagen is concerned, the listing on the application information from Volkswagen says your model, it's not going to be covered. So that's the deal. And not to mention, any IS38 turbo you're going to put on the car is going to have software on there anyway. So you're gonna blow out your warranty by putting performance software with your IS38 turbo to begin with. So no, it doesn't. Hopefully that answers your question and kind of explains more clearly why it's not covered. And yeah, thanks for the question. Thank you for watching episode 49 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen Audi questions. If you have any comments about the question answered in this show, be sure to leave in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.